All right, so last lesson we would have learnt how to create equations from tables of data and creating our linear relations. And so those equations were one way to represent a linear relation, one way to represent the data. Today we're going to learn another way. We are going to graph these linear relations. Now, before we can graph them, we need to do just a slight review from your elementary days. We need to know how to plot these coordinates, specifically on an XY axis. So your table will have all of these XY points of data, your independent and your dependent numbers of data. And I need to be able to plot them on an XY graph such as this. So this shouldn't be too hard. This should mainly be review. X is always the first number, and X is our horizontal axis. It goes from left to right. So if I wanted to plot this point, I've got to go to the number 2, positive 2 on the x-axis. So what does that look like? Well, I start at the origin, I go over 1, I go over 2. There's 2 on the x-axis. The second number will always be your y-coordinate or your dependent coordinate, and it's going to go on your vertical axis. So I already know I'm at 2 on the x-axis, and then I got to go up positive 3. Positive is in the up direction. So 1, 2, 3. So that is where the point A sits. And I'm just going to clean up my graph and put it right here. So that first point sits at A, or that point that is A sits at 2, 3. Let's do one more quickly. Let's do B together. So remember, X is first, and this time we're not going to positive 3, we're going to negative 3. So when I start at my origin, I gotta go 1, 2, 3 to the left. So there's my X coordinate. And then I'm still positive 4 in the Y, so I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4. So there is my B coordinates. Take some time, do the rest of those points while I clean up my shoddy work here. C is 0 on the X, so that means we're not moving anywhere. We're just staying at the origin. But I am going to go down negative 3 on the Y. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So that is point C. And D kind of has the same thing going on here, where I'm going to start out by going negative 5 in the X direction. So from my origin, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't have to move anywhere in the Y direction. So here is my coordinate for point D. And lastly, we've got a double negative. So starting at the origin, I'm going to go left 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I got to go negative 4 in the Y. So I got to go 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So there's E. This should be easy. If you can do it that way, you can take the points and write their XY coordinates. So now we're just going in the reverse direction. So for point A right here, I need the XY coordinate. So I know X always comes first. So starting at the origin, it looks like I got to go 1, 2, negative 3 to the left. So I had to go 3 to the left, or minus 3 in the X direction. And then I have to go up 2 to get to A. So that coordinate's going to be negative 3, 2. I always like to start at the origin. So for point B, I got to go from here to there. So it looks like we're at negative 3 once again on the x-axis, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5, down 5 on the y-axis. C might be a little tricky because it has a 0. So if you start at the origin, you don't need to move anywhere on the x-axis to get to C. So that means we have a 0 coordinate for x. But I do have to move down 1 to get to C. So it sits at -1 on the y-axis. D kind of poses the same thing. So starting at the origin, I got to go 1, 2, 3 on the x to get there. And once I'm at 3 on the x, I don't have to move any vertical, any y distance. So it sits at 0 on the y-axis. And lastly, point E. Well, point E sits at 1, 2, 3, 4 on the x. And how do I get to E? Well, I got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, positive 4 in the y direction. So, hopefully this is easy. It's pretty straightforward. I wish I was in class to see. Maybe we spent a little too much time on this part, but I'm not there, so I got to take it slow, if that's okay. All right, so let's get into more of the fun stuff here. Let's actually start graphing. Now, we've talked about the unit being called linear relations, and we talked about linear meaning a line. So every equation, every time you graph data, you should get a straight line. Otherwise, your data is incorrect, unless that's the purpose of the question. So anytime we're graphing, we are expecting straight lines. So if I'm lucky enough to be given a table of data, that means my XY coordinates are given. If I wanted to graph this, all I would have to do is plot each individual XY points on my graph. So it's nothing new than what we did 30 seconds ago. Here is the first point to plot. -2 on the X is right here. And then I got to go down 5 on the Y. So that's going to be right there. Let's do a second point. Let's do this one. 0 on the X means don't move at all on your X axis. -2 means go down to -2, go down 2 on the Y. So there's that point. And hopefully you can beat me in finishing the rest of these points. The third point is 2, 1, so I'm going to go over to 2 on my X, and then I'm going to go up +1 on the Y. And this one is 4, 4, so I'm going to go 4 on the X, up 4. So there's that point. And lastly, let's do 6, 7. 6 on the X, up 7. Now I'm feeling good about my plotting because these 5 points of data are all situated in a straight line. And I can verify that, and what we should do is when we're graphing plots of data, at this point in time, we should take a ruler and we should connect those dots with a straight line. And if you really wanted to be fancy, you could put little arrowheads at the end of that line, indicating the line goes on forever. So for now, it's a good idea to get into the habit of connecting those dots with a line. If you don't have a ruler, that's okay. Just draw a straight line as best as you can. You guys can go ahead and do this one. It's the exact same. I'll do it myself, but I'm going to shut up and you guys can just do it yourselves. So we're pretty much in quadrant 2. Here is my sets of data. They look like they're in a straight line, so I'm feeling pretty confident about my plotting abilities. And it's kind of hard for me to draw a straight line on my computer, or it's easy to draw a straight line, but it's hard to line it up properly. So hopefully I'm doing a semi-good job here. There we go. So this is still pretty easy, in my opinion. You shouldn't be struggling, really, at this point. So we're going to have to make you struggle at some point. And it's questions like these where you have to work a little harder. So sometimes they just give us an equation. They don't give us a table of values. They just say, here is the equation. This is an equation we would have made in lesson 1. Now graph this equation. So there's a few ways you can actually go about this, but the only way we know for this lesson is, well, if I had an XY table, it was very easy to graph. So because I don't have an XY table, why don't I just create my own XY table? I can do that. So there's X, there's Y, and I have my table. Now the only problem is I don't have any numbers. Well, it doesn't matter. I can pick my own numbers. If they're not going to give me any numbers to use, I'm going to pick my own. So what does that mean? Well, my equation of y equaling 2x minus 2, that's the equation they gave me. So I can figure out y values. I can figure out what y equals if I have an x value to plug into my equation. This is a function. That's how functions work. So what number am I going to plug in? Well, I don't know. Why don't we start with the easiest number? Why don't we start with 0? 0 is always a good place to start. So when x is 0, in other words, when I put 0 in for x, what do I get for y? Well, we can do some quick solving. So instead of writing an x, I'm going to put a 0. And I know that 2 times 0 is just 0. So y is equal to 0 minus 2. In other words, y is equal to minus 2. So what I did was I just chose a value, I plugged it into my equation, and I got out its matching coordinate pair. So when x is 0, y is negative 2. And I have found the first point I can plot on my graph at 0, negative 2. So start at the origin. 0 on the x means you don't move anywhere in the x. You go down 2. So there is the first point. Now I know this is a linear relation. I know there should be some pattern. However, I need to find one more set of values. So I hope you're okay. I'm just going to erase that one, and I'm going to start again. Y equals 2x minus 2. Well, I can't use 0 again. I have to pick a different value. And what is the next best value besides 0? I don't know, probably the number 1. So this time if I plug 1 into my equation, what happens? Well, y is equal to 2, not x. I'm plugging in 1 for x. Just like that. Doing some basic BEDMAS math. 2 times 1 is 2, so I'm left with 2 with the minus 2 at the end. So therefore y is equal to 2 minus 2, and I know 2 minus 2 is just 0. So I have found the corresponding y coordinate when x is equal to 1. So I'll plot the second point. 1 on the x, and then I don't move on the y. So the second point is right here. All right. I don't know if I'm tired because I'm using my mouse to move my hand, but I don't want to do any more math than I have to do. Now, trusting my math and trusting I found the first two coordinates properly, I can complete the rest of this table. If I take 2 as my next x coordinate, what must y have to be? Well, we see the pattern. Minus 2 to 0 means we went up 2. So from 0 to the next step means I also have to go up 2. So 0 plus 2 is 2. So that is the next coordinate. When x goes up by 1, y goes up by 2. When x goes up by 1, y goes up by 2. So now I've given myself a few more points to plot. 2, 2 goes right there. 3, 4, 3 on the x up 4 goes right there. And what color didn't we use? Green, I guess. 4, 6, 4 on the x up 6 goes right there. And now I've got a nice pretty set of data. I can take my ruler, or I can use my best judgment, and I can draw a line through those sets of data. It's a straight line, so I'm happy. It has to be a straight line or I've done something wrong. And I really hope I did the math properly on those first two coordinates. Because I was assuming I did the math properly and that incremental step was correct. And you guys aren't there to correct me, so hopefully we are okay. So you have this next one. All you. I'm going to take a breather, but give it a try. Once again, you'll need your X, Y table. And I would start with 0. 0 is always a good place to start. So when x goes up by 1, y is going down by 1. So when x goes up to 2, when it goes up by 1, I can expect y to go down 1. When x goes up, y goes down. There's that constant change. So 2 comma 1 sits there, it fits in, it's creating that straight line. And 3 comma 0 sits there. I am happy. Those 4 dots look like they are in a straight line. So I will connect them with my arrows. Now that's probably enough for today. I don't want to continue. This has been long enough without me in the room with you guys. So why don't you try a few of those textbook questions? I'm sure the first few do not involve the next topic, which we're going to talk about when I get back tomorrow, discrete and continuous data. So when I draw a straight line through my points, that is not always correct. So tomorrow we will discuss when it is acceptable to draw a straight line and when it is acceptable to just leave those dots as they are. All right, give those questions a try, at least a couple of them, and we will pick off tomorrow. So have a good rest of your day.